Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for July 24th, 2026. I'm Benji Fisher, sharing my screen and moderating, and also present are Kent R. and Ralph Kohler. Thank you both for coming. So we're returning to an issue we've talked about before. For the sake of the recording, it's issue 2704931. Provide Drupal root path on file system admin form. Um, And just to give some context about what this issue is about, if I navigate to configuration, media, file system, part of what this issue does is add this section at the top, the application root directory, /var/www/html. Since I'm using a DDEV container, that's the correct root directory on the DDEV container. Um, and I don't have handy um, a Drupal site without the changes applied. Um, Maybe Ralph, if you could
One second. Yeah, one
apply
second,
a site
Benji.
for comparison.
I just check out the main branch again.
So we have looked at this issue before, and I'm just going to go to the bottom and scroll up a bit. So the last time we reviewed it was in January of this year, about 6 months ago. And thought we would check the current version of the issue and see whether they've made the changes we requested. So I guess I'm going to skip this question about, well, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll scroll back up to comment 44.
42 is the first, 44, and then 47.
And I guess 44 was a comment for me, previous usability review. And I think this is the comment we're referring to. Looking at the comments on this issue, and I listed some earlier comments, it seems that the idea evolved from prefix the relative paths with Drupal root to show the absolute paths, to show both the configured paths and the absolute paths. No one ever gave a use case for showing the absolute paths. Comment number 35 mentioned the actual location of specific stream wrappers. And I asked Bolliger, who's done most of the work on this issue, can you say more about that? If it is something that comes up often, then it is worth some effort to add information to the page. If it comes up rarely, then we can let the occasional user combine the root directory with the relative path. In short, one, decide whether it is really worth adding the absolute path to each entry, and two, depending on one, either go back to the approach of comment 21 or else come up with more semantic accessible markup for the absolute paths. Um, so Voliger didn't answer on the issue, but he did reply in Slack. Um, but just looking at the current state, we not only give bar/dub/html at the top of the page, but in the private file system path, it's been added. And that seems to be the only place, although what shows up depends on um, how the application is installed. And let me go. Thank you, Ralph. Ralph has prepared a comparison site.
With the current state of the main branch.
Right. And configuration media file system. So it starts with the public site file system path sites default files, which is the second item when using the merge request. Um, the public file base URL, the optimized assets file system path. I don't think either of those changes. Sites default. The private file system path on Ralph's version is not set. The temporary directory is /temp. Okay, so we at least have one. Depending on how things are set up, there can be more than one, but we have /var /www and then HTML sites default files private. Um, I wouldn't want to use that location on a production site, but this is running locally for testing purposes. Um, so let's look at the rest of Ralph's comment from January. Um, on touch devices, the option to hover is not available with the current implementation. The absolute path is inaccessible to users. So I think that's totally changed. Um, so it seems that we are showing just the private file system path as a full absolute path and not trying to show both that and the relative path separately. So I think a lot of our questions were related to um, various ways of trying to show both at the same time, either listing them both separately, which of course adds clutter to the page, or putting the initial part in boldface, or showing just the relative part and then providing a hover effect to show the full path. Um, but with the current approach, it's just showing the full path. So I guess going back to my comment 44, it evolved to show both the configured path and the absolute paths. And the current approach abandons that and just shows the absolute path, it seems. Um, I wonder if he also updated the issue description to describe that as the proposed resolution. So on touch devices, the option to hover, I don't think that's relevant anymore. The information contained in the tooltip, I don't think that's relevant anymore. In Safari, the time has to remain still until the tooltip shows on hover. That won't be relevant anymore. The presence of the information has no affordance. The way the tooltip behaves is not meeting a WCAG criterion. Aside from the aforementioned issues directly related to the tooltip, you also have related problems, the inconsistency checking whether to add an absolute path version or not. Simo already added in number 47, the previous comment. The bolded labels get a mouse pointer on hover. Again, that's not present in the current approach.
Um, it is. I get the mouse pointer. When I try in Safari, I get the mouse pointer.
Oh, so not the bolded parts of the path, but the bolded labels.
Yeah. Yeah. So it indicates some interaction or clickability, which isn't there. It's just information and text.
But that seems to be present in the current Drupal main branch. So
Yeah.
that doesn't seem to be a problem introduced by this issue.
Yeah. Agreed. But usually I use issues if I notice something to raise the problem. But yeah, could be a follow-up then.
Okay. In summary, based on the fact that the information about the application root directory and the relative paths is already available, and a user is able to piece together the absolute path on their own, and due to the number of accessibility and usability related issues in relation with the current tooltip implementation, we would rather suggest to make this issue only about adding the application root directory and move the work in discussion how the absolute paths are communicated and acted on to a dedicated follow-up issue. Um, so a lot of changes were made, but no explanatory comments. Let's just check the proposed resolution, introduce a description of the application route, and add info for relative paths with resolved absolute paths. Um, and let's look at these screenshots. So this is the before screenshot. So private file system is configured, unlike on Ralph's system. Here, the public file system path is shown relative. Is that what it currently shows? Sites default files. Yes. Um, all right. So this, actually, I'm not sure. So this screenshot doesn't show the root directory being added to any of the other paths. Let me see if I can change my setup to use dot dot slash private as the private systems path. I'll be working in a window that I'm not sharing. Uh, oh, so in my current setup, I actually have set an absolute path of starting with var dub dub HTML. So let's see. Let me change it to, what was it, dot dot slash private?
Like,
Okay, I think that should do it. And then if I reload this page, um, okay, so this actually is consistent with the screenshot, and I was mistaken earlier. It's not this issue that's adding the full path for the private file system path. It's because that's what I had set in settings.php. And if I change it to dot dot slash private, then that's all I see. So this is now a much simpler change. Um, it's just adding the part at the top, and anyone who needs to find what site's default file means has to combine the root directory with the relative path and figure it out for themselves. Um, so apparently Bulliger went with the suggestion that we just simplify the whole patch and just make this addition at the top of the page and not try to show the full path for the other paths. So I think that's following one of the suggestions we made. We gave some options, but I'm inclined to say that by simplifying, um, that it's resolved all of the usability issues that we brought up. Agree? Disagree?
maybe just one question also in hindsight of the discussion we had recently about what was it? About the Drupal CLI issue we've discussed. And there was the concept of CLI, so it is on the server. And looking at the description we have for the application root directory, I wonder would it make sense to be a bit slightly more specific and also add the detail that it's basically on the server in the file system, something like that? Or is it enough with, I'm not sure if we've discussed that before, but just the top level directory of the Drupal installation. Because that way with var www.html, one can think, is it in my own file system or where is the var www if the other ones are really in the local file system? And also we refer to a local file system for example, public file system paths. So maybe the remote top level directory of the Drupal installation, that would be basically analog to the other description that way.
So I don't really see a problem there. Where is Drupal installed? I don't think we have to say that it's installed on the server. I think that's clear enough from context, but that's just my opinion. I'm willing to be outvoted on that.
I also don't have a real strong opinion about it. It was just a thought in the context of being more specific and clear. And it, in particular, on that page, it could, those concepts can be really demanding and confusing to less technical people. And for someone who is not that familiar with, for example, the technology underneath and the code, um, that detail that is for you, for example, completely clear, it could pose a certain kind of barrier to someone else or uncertainty. So that is my only worry, slight worry, to be more precise. So,
Well, what is the context? Why would someone be visiting this page? Either they're randomly scrolling through the admin menu and they find, oh, file system, what's there? Um, or they're, you know, trying to figure out why something isn't working the way they expect it to be working.
yep.
Um, and in that case, by the time they get here, I think they should understand that these paths are going to be on the server.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, some things that are potentially confusing is that are things like language codes. Like I've installed the Umami profile, so every path is prefixed with the language code /en since I'm an English speaker. And that does not appear in the public file base URL. What else can confuse it? Oh yeah, if people um, if if an installation uses not the web server's document root, but a subdirectory of that, that's something else that could get prefixed. Um, and these are pretty technical problems. I see Kent gave a second thumbs up, which I think is agreeing with my suggestion that um, that the usability problems introduced by the complex code are are satisfied by just removing the complex code and simplifying the whole issue. Kent, do you have an opinion on whether we should be more explicit about um, the root directory being on the server? Whether we should, I mean, everywhere else we talk about local file system path. Um, Perhaps we should use the same ter terms for the application root directory.
Yeah.
Okay, and Kent says no opinion. So I guess if you want to suggest specific microcopy so that it's, you know, sort of a very constructive criticism, um, then we can do that. I also think that this issue has been around for a long, long time. Just look at the issue number. Um, and we've already reviewed it a few times and changes have been made in response to our reviews. I'm inclined to say it's good enough.
Yeah, but if it take a look, basically everything down there, all the descriptions refer to a local file system path, and the application roots slightly stands out compared to that. So maybe if it could be unified. And we don't have to spend a half an hour on that. Mm. But if we come up with a quick suggestion, it would be also quick on the issue and it wouldn't hold anything back from my perspective. There shouldn't be any bike shedding.
I mean, arguably, starting each description with the words a local file system path where
That's also
is
redundant.
exactly, or I guess where isn't consistent. Sometimes it's for, or in one place it's for.
Oof. Or maybe open a follow-up issue and unify the descriptions. Otherwise, this one, you're completely right. Um, Strictly speaking, all the descriptions would have to be reworked from that point of view.
Okay, so I'll be happy to leave a comment on this issue and remove the needs usability review tag. Um, and then I guess there's still the request for some test coverage of new functionality. I'll even update the issue description a little bit.
But out of curiosity, is there much functionality at all that has to be tested there? Of course, most of it got stripped away.
Right. The only thing that needs to be tested is whether this new thing appears. Um, I'll have a look at it. That's sort of out of scope of usability, but I will give an opinion as a developer whether additional testing is needed, and I'll probably base that on the existing test. Um,
And strictly speaking, so the recommended points would be simply having two follow-ups, one for having a mouse pointer on labels that have no functionality at all and are just information, and the other maybe to unify the descriptions on that file system page. But as I've said, out of scope for the issue then.
okay, I can mention those two things, although, I think spending a lot of time on this help text is not something that is interesting to me. I think that there are a lot of other things where my time would be better spent, or almost anyone's time would be better spent. Um, but the
Yeah,
pointer,
then
oh,
drop the description one.
okay, maybe I'm sort of curious now. Why do we have a pointer? When was that introduced? A little bit of have to do a little bit of research before opening an issue on that. But maybe I'll take a stab at that.
It's a label element.
Yes. And then somewhere, here we go. Form item label sets the cursor to a pointer. If I uncheck that, then I don't get that behavior. So Again, it'll take a little research, but it shouldn't be hard to figure out when this CSS rule was added and why.
Yeah, I guess in certain contexts, if you have, for example, a text field or any other interface component you're able to interact with, then the pointer makes total sense. But for a case like this, when you just have text and use the label for the text, then it doesn't make sense and is counterproductive.
Yeah, I see your point. I just don't want to open an issue without understanding
Yeah,
the
yeah,
full context.
totally agree. Totally agree. I just
Okay.
I guess people working on the issue probably haven't making the distinction between the regular use of the label element and the use on the file system page. Or I'm not sure if there are any other contexts in the Drupal admin UI where a label is used on as a label for just text. But yeah, looking for the reasoning behind is definitely worth the time.
Okay, so we still have 15 minutes left. I missed the meeting last week, but I think Ralph, you suggested that we might have another look at the issue you discussed then, and you and Kent were both there, right?
Yeah, and Kent was basically the person working most of the recent commits there, so he is way more familiar with it. I'm just looking for.
So for the sake of recording, this is another old issue, 2848507. Indicate that grouping elements have child element errors for usability and accessibility, UX and A11Y. Um, and did the screenshots give? So is this a before screenshot?
I'm not looking. I'm currently preparing
Okay.
the issue.
I, I, th I think these screenshots show what it should look like. And I think I looked at this issue a long, long time ago, so I have some familiarity with it. And it, as I recall, it is a serious problem and obviously a hard problem to fix, which is why it's been around so long. Um, it's 9.5 years old. Can we fix it before it turns 10?
One second, Claro. I just have to prepare the settings again. Okay. Instructions is set both default and admin theme to Claro. Done that. And now I quickly.
Yeah, and here's a link to a usability meeting from 2022. I was probably on that meeting. Oh, and Kent says in the Zoom chat, those screenshots were just before the last meeting, and he's made changes this week uh, based on the feedback from last week's meeting. That's good.
How the
So shall we try to trigger some errors in the existing system to see what the current state of affairs is?
Yeah, we can. And then we can you have to basically go to the settings page P and add the following. Uh, the E is missing at the end. And then enable the form test module and set the default admin theme to Claro. And then there are three scenarios we've taken a look at.
Okay, I have updated settings.php. Um, let's go to the extension page, and inline form errors is what I have to enable.
No, no, form test.
Oh,
You
so I'd
look,
better do that with Drush then.
or no, you could also just tilde for form and then you find the form test UI. That's the way I did right now locally. Form underscore underscore. Yeah, and now you have form API.
Oh, okay. Just install that. I
And then go to appearance and set Claro as the default.
Claro.
And Claro itself is probably the admin theme at the bottom.
Oh, unfortunately,
Yeah,
yes.
it is. Good. And then the first one would be go to the following page. I'll paste it in the chat.
Okay. Oh, and I see Kent has given us in the chat. Um, that comment 213 is where the current screenshots are. But see, I think I need to keep the language code. Oh, all these deprecation messages. Well, let me try
I
removing the EN.
yeah, guess that's the problem.
Still page
Oh,
not found. So let's see. No, not this one, which is the right. Here we go. Go and find comment 213. So these are the current screenshots. Um,
what you could actually test is go on the node edit form. That doesn't need the module. Then go into any node. Doesn't really matter
and
which. You could also use an existing. It's just about adding a new URL alias in the sidebar and omit the slash at the beginning. Just type in about or food or foo or whatever. It doesn't matter and submit.
alias path has to start with a slash, so that's a helpful error message, and it's highlighted here. Um, so that doesn't,
And if you collapse the URL alias, okay, that is changed then.
what
I
if
haven't had
I,
the time to look at the merge request yet. I was swamped the last few days with other things.
all right, it's the only permissions for the form API test. It doesn't have any configuration or anything. All right, we only have a few minutes left, so um, can we work with the screenshots rather than with trying to reproduce it live?
Yeah, better than nothing for now. Yeah. Neat. Um,
Oh, and it's the same. The screenshot shows the same error message that I saw. Here's a screenshot of the status quo, top error block, and in new screenshots of vertical tabs, accordion style details, and standard details. Okay, so status quo, that's the error message I saw, and URL is it is expanded, and as I saw, if I close it, oh, I guess I've moved away from that page. But when I tried closing it and then resubmitting the form, the details element was opened. So this screenshot shows pretty much what I saw. Um, I guess I'm not sure where one screenshot is starting and the next one is beginning. So maybe it'll help if I open a screenshot in a separate tab. New screenshots, vertical tabs. So I guess these are, no, not this. These are the vertical tabs. Um, Accordion style details. So that's this URL alias screenshot. That's the accordion style and standard details. So I guess what are the remaining questions? So I guess this is a comment from the previous review. Strictly speaking, there is even the need for an active error state, which is most important and sort of mandatory in the context of vertical tabs. Design input is required in this case. Otherwise, it would be impossible to determine the active vertical tab in the following example. You would never know which of the six vertical tabs is the active one. And replying to that, yeah, I need direction regarding the change. Maybe a small half circle protruding from the border, like in the navigation module active menu items, or both a blue and red left border.
um, Banshee, 1 second. The,
And the detail from reading from the Zoom chat, the details screenshot shows the new left red border and the error icon. So just the details screenshot is this one.
um, I can quickly demonstrate, if I could quickly share my screen, then I can demonstrate live, because it's working now on my end.
Go ahead.
1 second. I'm just preparing the last of the three.
But well, we do
Okay.
just have a couple of minutes left in the hour.
Yep. I'm hurrying. Uh, okay, we're looking. Okay, sure. That is the first one. Um, Basically, before that, in the last revision, we looked at um, the styling for failing field sets was only visible when they were collapsed, while when they're um, when where they expanded, they basically dropped the error styling and only showed the errors for the fields. But in the oral interface, you all all the time have basically not sure what the exact naming was. Uh, Failing in parentheses something, and that way in each state that it was has an error was communicated while usually it was not, and that was changed. Things got a bit more red, and in the example here with three failing field sets, it's a bit overwhelming. But if you consider having basically a long not edit form with, let's say, 5 to 10 field sets, and only one has as containing a one or more fields that failing, it's a completely different story in that way. From my perspective, that looks better. And yeah, and Kent also changed the icon in here. It was also using the prohibition sign, and there he has changed it to that X that is used on the status reports page. And he already noted that basically changing the iconography on the status error itself is a bit more difficult. But yeah, from at least my own perspective, I consider it mandatory to be consistent across the entire experience to have a single icon for a single purpose and not a mixed. So that is basically that the first example. The second is in here, same case as you can see here. Also in expanded and collapsed form, you have the one highlighted in red. Um, Same story. And the trickiest detail is basically about um,
The vertical
vertical tab.
tabs.
Exactly. And if you, for example, empty those, you have three failing. Um, the other problem was that is the other problem before that icon back then was in the in the previous iteration, the icon was right aligned while the label was left aligned, and that gap in between is in particular problematic on field sets. On
Hmm.
vertical tabs, it is not that problematic, but still, having it in close proximity is a good thing. But as you can see here, um, our recommendation was at the moment that sole the sole difference was basically based on color. You have blue for the active one and red for error ones. But in case, how do you recognize it's still a remaining problem. How do you recognize the active error vertical tab? If you have more than one vertical tab that is failing, it's impossible to determine. That's one problem. And also, if you take a look in comparison, that is also more of a design. Where is the window? Ah, there it is. Apologies for the switch. As you can see here, check and check. Um, the color difference between the states is 1.68 in between the two. And for people that are only focusing on that left border, it could be sort of problematic. They would have to read and then grasp what the color is, and that is challenging. And on the other hand, looking at that changed icon, to me, that X in that context, if you have it on the left side, it communicates more like something like I can click on that, and then that tab closes. That cancel or close button, that is basically the association in that context, if it's placed there. Tricky.
So is the icon not enough to indicate the error, where the error is? I mean, I understand the point that the color isn't enough, but there's also an icon here. Is that not good enough?
Yes, but how do you distinguish what the current active error is? I'm on
By
currently admin.
the pale gray border around around the vertical tab, it's open on the right for the
Yeah,
selected one.
but the pale border has basically a color contrast of 1.3 that is not visible. The required
I,
minimum for state is 3 to 1. So,
okay, and if there isn't an error state, then there's a green border on the top and bottom that that we're overriding. Ah, that's odd.
no,
Why are we overriding it?
not sure. Hmm. Uh, Kent wrote, for vertical tabs, the icon should be at the right. Not sure why it's on the left for you. Ah, okay. I also don't know. I just applied it for the first time right now and checked it out right before. I haven't taken a closer look. Um, I'll do over the weekend if I manage.
And could
And
you go back to the details
to
example?
this one, yeah.
Yes. So when the details is open, maybe you've already discussed this, but it seems odd to me to have the angry red border for the entire open details element if the problematic fields are also highlighted in red.
Yeah, but that's basically the point I tried to make before in the oral interface. You have the crap, where is it?
I mean, certainly if the details element is closed, it needs an indication. Once you've opened it, I don't see the necessity.
Um, oh yeah, now I found it. The
Ah,
labeling basically after you have details element, and after that you have basically parentheses contains errors visually hidden, and that way that that label is there all the time, no matter if it's collapsed or expanded. So the field set is labeled as containing a field component that contains an error, while in the visual interface you only in the previous iteration that styling with the error was only in the collapse state. Um, I see the point with in the field set it is sort of debatable. It could be argued, as you've said, it might be too much, but on the other hand, um, over here, if you switch that, um, as soon as a, for example, this one is failing, and at the moment the active one is welcome await. If I switch now to that one, the styling was removed and it was blue as the indication for the active one, and that way you get a switching between um, active and error state for the same vertical tab, and it is for people with a small working memory that could and the attention span, it could be really, really demanding. And if you switch in between those, and it's also the point that you can switch and change things in that in those vertical tabs without saving the configuration. So you can do a lot of changes in all the different vertical tabs, and at the end you save. And if you jump then between all those tabs, it's really, really challenging. I struggle myself.
okay, and I've been doing a bad job of keeping track of the Zoom chat. So Ken said for vertical tabs, the icon should be at the right. Not sure why it's on the left for you, but it certainly seems to be on the left. Um, and what else? I don't think we're overriding the green border. I'll double check on main. Okay, we're already several minutes past the hour. Um, I think, as I said, I'll leave a comment on the other issues, so maybe that'll give the two of you time to catch up either on the issue or in Slack. How does that sound?
Yeah. I'll take a closer look after on the weekend and then I comment on the issue or write you can. Yeah, I just have to take a closer look.
Okay, and in the chat, Ken says, sounds good. Thanks for looking at it.
And thanks for working on it. Oof.
Not an easy problem, as I said earlier. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks again for coming, and I'll be here next week. Hope you can make it then too.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend. Oh,
Bye.
and stop sharing. Bye bye.